On today's show, Sacramento Kings 0-5 in preseason action. Cause for concern? How does DeMar DeRozan look playing alongside DeAaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis? And DeAaron Fox's commentary on not taking a max extension yet with the Kings. It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can head on over to FanDuel.com and take a look at all the different odds available this football season. You can check out their parlay builder, who's going to win different divisions, conferences, season awards, or just the outright favorites to win this year's Super Bowl. Right now, the Chiefs plus 450, the Ravens plus 700, the 49ers and Lions both at plus 850, and then right behind them, the Buffalo Bills at plus 1,000. So for all those odds and so much more, be sure to check out FanDuel.com. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Kings, Matt George. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Kings. And Matt, a bit of a slightly concerning preseason for the Sacramento Kings. How much stock do we put into this 0-5 Kings preseason record?
Well, if there's a time to play terribly, it's the preseason, and the Sacramento Kings certainly, for the most part, played terribly. Actually, honestly, the first game of preseason was fantastic. Like the first glimpse we got at this new look Sacramento Kings team, DeMar DeRozan went a perfect 6 for 6. The Kings in the first half, their offense looked seamless. And then from there on, they just kind of slowly went downhill. Now, in the first two preseason games against the Warriors, when Mike Brown shut down the Kings starters and main bench players, the Kings had leads in both those games. So it's not a guarantee that they would win, but they were winning when you pulled them out. And then the end of bench guys just couldn't close things out. So the Kings going 0-5 in the preseason really doesn't matter. To me, what does matter is the fact that the Sacramento Kings shot horrendously from three-point range throughout the preseason. Everybody struggled to shoot. I think the Kings ended up shooting in like the maybe mid to high 20s from three-point range, 20% from three-point range the entire or preseason, which is definitely a concern.
0.4%. Dead last of all the teams in preseason action.
It better be dead last. If not, whoever shot worse than that just needs to not be in the NBA anymore. It was that brutal. And when the strength of the Sacramento Kings is supposed to be their offense, you take away their three-point shooting, or if they're unable to shoot threes consistently, that makes their what's supposed to be unguardable, multi-dimensional offense way more one or two-dimensional, which takes away so many of their strengths. That being said, Mike Brown and the Kings were not running any sets during preseason. Offensively, they were just doing their read and react, DHO type offense. So there's a lot that they haven't shown us that I think we'll see Thursday night against the Timberwolves.
How much of it just, and again, based off just kind of the read and react offense and everything, how much do you attribute the lackluster three-point shooting to them? Just, I mean, it could be anything, right? It's 5-game sample size, could just be everybody got the bad shooting bug at the same time. Was there an issue with like the quality of shots that they were generating, or did you see any concerns with maybe kind of some of the spacing issues that we projected and kind of thought, man, okay, well, DeMar DeRozan now in a Kings jersey, how does that work for the spacing with DeAaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, those kind of factors at all?
Jackson, I'm really glad you asked that, because I think a lot of people are going to jump to conclusions about that without having watched. Spacing was not an issue at all. Neither was shot distribution, and neither was the looks the Kings were getting. The Kings were generating a ton of open looks. They just couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat for some reason. So there's not that level of concern. Some would say tired legs. Both Domantas Sabonis and Malik Monk made comments at times during preseason that this team was a little tired. Now, preseason is also a time for conditioning to get yourself ready for the NBA level. So there's that element of it too. Plus, Mike Brown is notorious for having kind of long, intense practices. He had a lot of two-a-days in the first week of training camp before preseason actually begun. So while Mike didn't seem too concerned or seem to be on the same line of thinking as the players with them being tired. He didn't seem like that should be an issue. The players brought it up, so I think that's an element of it too. Not that this team is trying to make excuses. Regardless, like, it's not hard to shoot better than 25% as a team, but the Kings need to shoot drastically better. And it's not like these aren't just things where a lot of the conversation was, oh, it's preseason, they weren't trying as hard. Well, trying harder doesn't make the ball go into the basket more, right? So it's not like Thursday against the T-Wolves, the shots automatically going to start falling because they're now regular season shots, not preseason shots.
No, but
so,
Matt, they're going to try harder, so the shots are going to go in.
Sure, they'll try to shoot better, I suppose, as if they weren't trying already. I don't know. Regardless, like the 3-point percentage has to look a lot better. The Kings are going to be in big trouble to start the season, which is a time that I feel like they need to strike.
So as it stands, you mentioned his name a couple times in there, and I'm glad you were able to kind of shed some light on the struggles and that they weren't directly as a result of the addition of DeMar DeRozan. But how has he looked in a Kings jersey? Just kind of settling in, playing alongside Fox and Sabonis. How has he fit into the system so far?
Yeah, that's where I feel like the Kings are holding stuff back a little bit, because the first game, I mean, he scored 3 buckets right out of the gate, and all 3 of them were off of Domantas Sabonis 2-man game dribble handoffs. And this is like something that both Sabonis and DeRozan feel is going to be unguardable. We only got one glimpse of DeMar and DeAaron Fox playing in a fourth quarter together. That was the close game in Utah in which they lost. They looked good, certainly not great, but in that moment, the Kings got something out of the two of them. But I think there's a lot more of what DeMar is going to look like with the Sacramento Kings than what they showed. And I think after game 1, when we saw how seamlessly the DHO game could work between the two, the Kings kind of went away from it. They didn't do it as much, because whether it was they were trying to hide it so there wasn't enough film on it for teams to break down, or maybe they were just trying other things because they knew that worked. But nothing's changed in terms of the perceived fit of DeMar DeRozan in this Kings offense. It's going to make them so much better as long as they're knocking down threes.
We also still haven't gotten quite the full picture of the Kings kind of, starting lineup, or at least their projected impact players yet. Where is Kevin Huerter at kind of health-wise at this point? Is he going to be available on opening night?
So Huerter has been fully cleared to return to full contact practice. That was actually before the final 2 preseason games. He didn't get into either preseason game, which I was a little disappointed that he didn't get some run in game 5 in the Intuit Dome against the Los Angeles Clippers. That being said, there's no reason to believe he's not going to play on Thursday. All expectations are that he does play. The question then becomes, is there any way he works his way into the starting lineup? I actually touched on that on tonight's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. I don't see a scenario where that happens unless he comes into practice all week and is just shooting so lights out. The Kings offense is like, okay, we have to include this guy, because Keon Ellis has kind of firmly held down that spot. And there's no reason to look at this preseason and go, oh, that was Keon Ellis's fault, right? And Keon certainly adds a more defensive identity to that Kings starting lineup when defense is still a big question for the Kings. But Kevin Huerter should play. The Kings need him to play, not just to help their shooting, but because they need their second unit, right? For much of this preseason, they didn't have the vast majority of their second unit. Jordan McLaughlin was hurt, then finally played a couple of games. Trey Lyles hasn't played at all. He's still a question mark if he's going to play or not to open up the season. So the Kings need their reinforcements in that second unit. The starters can't play 48 minutes.
I mean, some teams wish their starters could play 48 minutes, but that's not always a possibility, unfortunately.
Tom Thibodeau.
There we go. Hey, you know what? Tom Thibodeau actually, I think, achieves that at least, a few times throughout the regular season for sure. That's him getting his team up to speed cardio wise. 48 minutes, that's a preseason thing. You better be ready for 50 plus in the regular. No, anyways, look, final thing I've got for you, Matt. There was some commentary from DeAaron Fox about kind of his possibility of signing an extension with the Kings. I won't read the full quote verbatim, but essentially he kind of alluded to, right, kind of seeing where the Kings were at, organizationally. He drew comparisons to guys like Jason Tatum, Bam Adebayo, and kind of the success, or close to success, I guess, that those teams have had. The Celtics obviously fresh off their title run, Bam with a couple finals appearances, and kind of signed it off by saying, they have kind of the security of their teams have kind of made it to that point in their journey, right? They've made it to the finals. They've either won a chip, whatever. And so he wants to make sure that they're kind of continuing down that path. How do we feel about those comments from DeAaron Fox?
again, shameless plug. This was the main topic of the most recent episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. So I won't go too deep into it. So you go and check out that
give
podcast.
us the elevator pitch to send everybody back over there. Yeah, there we go.
Essentially, I took his main comments from that article, that Athletic article, and we just kind of broke it down. And essentially, what he's saying is he's holding the organization accountable. He spent his entire career in Sacramento, and only over the last 2 years has he been a part of the winning team. He just wants to make sure he's not signing a 4 or 5 year contract extension for the Kings to get back into a playoff drought and mediocrity, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's the same thing that fans have been calling for a while. I think there's a fear in Sacramento of losing the guy, and no matter what he said out other than, no, I'm definitely re-signing, that fear would always exist. But there's nothing that DeAaron Fox said that should be overly concerning or you should be overly critical of, because he's motivated by winning and wants to make sure that the Sacramento Kings are putting their best foot forward to win, just like he's expected to play at his best as a max money and potentially super max money player if he meets those qualifications. That being said, Jackson, I'll say this. If he does become a super max player and the Kings put money in front of him that only they can give him, I have a hard time believing, regardless of the winning situation, that he walks away from that. But we'll have to wait and see if that happens.
Hey, man, you put a Supermax contract in front of me, it's going to be really hard to walk away from. I don't care what team puts it in front of me.
Hey, put that money in front of me. I'll go 0-82. I don't care.
Oh, man. What will the Kings look like in the regular season? What have they been hiding from us throughout this preseason? How will DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, and Domantas Sabonis look as one of the newest big threes in the NBA? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Kings. Matt, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Always a pleasure, Jackson.